We've all seen the obnoxiously huge weapons being swung around effortlessly in various anime and video games and so forth. The problem is, in reality, mere mortals cannot swing such large swords around quite so easily. In many cases, not even the world's strongest man could ever even pick them up in the first place. As a result, we're forced to downscale these weapons to make them barely manageable. Now, in this video, we're going to be building Saitama, the one-punch contraption that can swing any sword, up to and including the heaviest sword ever made. Alright, we are losing the light out here, but this is the beginning. This is just a big piece of heavy wall pipe. It's gonna be filled with concrete to give it weight. Now, the steel mill got me the wrong size. This is 1/8 of an inch too big. Instead of wasting time getting new material, I'm just gonna turn it down in the lathe. Alright, that's enough of that. I got that end at 1.5 inches and that end at 1 3/4 inches, just like the real Dragon Slayer handle. I've got this all welded up. Probably my worst weld I've ever done, but I'm just trying to do this really fast. This thing's only going to be used as a test a couple times and then it's going to get thrown away. So the handle here, I beveled it down to a point, and then this is all filled in with welds. Probably 8 passes of weld in here. We just gotta fill this with concrete now. Alright, I'd say that's about enough. Didn't want to fill this all the way. If you've ever dealt with concrete before, it retains some moisture, and when you heat it up a lot, it just explodes. Like, all the moisture turns to steam and you get this big concrete explosion. I'm gonna let this set up for a bit and then I'll just stitch weld the top on. Hopefully I will survive the encounter. Alright, so this giant chunk of steel is going to be the basis of the handle mount. Now, I could machine this, but I mean, that's a little bit of material there, so I think I'm going to bring this over to the big bandsaw that I've never even used, and I'm going to at least cut this section out and probably this bottom section out. Little cut to test it out, and then we'll make the bigger cuts from there. Okay, that looks like we made it. Let me back the blade out of that cut. I think we're there. Let's see. Whew. Not too bad. That's actually a very expensive piece of flat bar now. Could come handy in the future. You know, one final note here. I'm really impressed with how straight this cut was. If you look very carefully, you can see the scribe line, maybe 1/16 of an inch. And if we follow the cut, it's basically the same distance all the way down. I would say it got slightly thicker this end. I mean, by the tiniest amount, but that is the cleanest 18-inch by 4-inch cut I've ever seen. I'm gonna do this section next. Cutting speed isn't affected by how thick this is, whereas the machining process would. So I've only got to do a 12-inch cut, and then, I don't know, 4 inches maybe, 3. So that'll actually be maybe an hour or 2 at this point, now that I've got the machine dialed in. So I think that's the best way to go about it. Okay, we cut the cut short a little bit here. You can see there's just a little bit left, but you can see we're barely attached. I'm gonna finish that off by hand because I don't want the bottom part of the blade to cut too far into this material and weaken it. So let's pull it out of there and finish it. Alright, let's go drag this thing over to the milling machine. Oh, much lighter now. Here we're just milling all of those bandsaw cut surfaces flat, and then we're adding this groove on both sides of it for future clearance. Over here, we're milling material out to make clearance for the nuts and bolts that will hold the sword handle, followed by drilling this hole pattern on the flat portion for even more bolts. Finally, I'm milling this piece of square stock to size to be the pivot mechanism. This big hole here will hold the shaft that will be the pivot itself. Off screen, I cut and machine these two plates to size. They're the basis of the pivot mechanism itself. I'm just drilling and tapping holes for the bearings, the pivot itself, as well as some removable safety pins to limit the travel of the mechanism. And then this is another piece of plate that I'm cutting to use as the mounting base of the whole pivot assembly. Alright, we got this whole thing tacked together, and that was way more work than I wanted it to be. But the truth is, I need this arm to be kind of level, not like canted like this. It's going to make aiming the sword very difficult. Alright, let's see what we got here. Oh, exactly 0.0. I guess this is a very level table, so that makes sense. And if we get this right, so it looks like we're about 1/10 of a degree off. That's pretty good, I would say. I deliberately undersized the bolts, so they'll have a little bit of play in them, and I can adjust this axle shaft, so to speak. Now don't get me wrong, I realize everything's going to move once I start welding everything. There's going to be warping and distortion, but I want it to start as close as possible, and then I can use these bolts and such to adjust and hopefully get this thing as close to level and straight as possible so the sword will fly straight and not crooked. Alright, we are all just tacked up here, but I think we're looking pretty good. I found some scrap pieces of steel to fit in here. Believe it or not, I did not even cut this. This just fit exactly like this. And then on the back side, very similar. I just had to sand the sides a little bit, but I just didn't want the thing to collapse in on itself. And I figure the more kind of reinforcement I have, even just while welding it, so the whole thing doesn't get out of shape, then the better off I'm going to be. But yeah, we're looking pretty good. I think this thing's going to be nice and solid. I'm going to leave it like this all tacked together until I tack it to the base plate. Then I'll fully weld everything. Alright, we are on to the base pieces here. We've got 10-foot lengths. These are 6x3. We've got really thick walls here. This is 3/8 of an inch. I think each one of these weighs 150 pounds or so. Should be more than sufficient. However, I need to drill a bunch of holes in them, and this seemed like the best idea using a mag drill instead of trying to drag this over to the milling machine with the tiny little table on it. It would be impossible, nearly impossible to set this up. However, the issue is the mag drill is slightly wider than these. See, it kind of hangs off the side a little bit. So I added a ratchet strap for just a little assurance. Even if the mag does break free, I don't want it to spin and break my arm or fall on the floor and break my $1,700 mag drill. So wish me luck on this one. Alright, we did our 4 holes down there to hold the base pieces to the forklift. This is what those holes are for. This is just a simple fabricated U-shaped bracket that will wrap around the back of the forklift forks to keep the whole assembly from sliding off. Now I'm going to add 2 sets of 2 larger holes at the end in the middle to hold ratchet straps. Okay, I just got 4 more holes to drill, and they're gonna hold these 3/4 inch bolts. Now these bolts will actually be spikes that will be driven into the underside of the forklift forks. This is really just a secondary method of keeping the assembly from sliding off. All right, just a little autopsy here because I was curious. Here is this brand new blade. You can see the teeth, each of these carbide teeth brazed on, and you can see the point on the tooth. You come over here, there are no points on any of the teeth, not even one. Every single one broke off and then it just stopped cutting. I think I got my money's worth out of that blade. I bought that one 6 years ago. Okay, game time. We gotta weld this thing all together now. I've got a piece of plate identical to the base plate of the pivot. That's gonna go down here. The pivot's gonna go all the way down there. Underneath, I'm gonna have these thick wall square tubing. There's already one under here, kind of hard to see. I'm just gonna tack weld everything up for now, and I'll even add tacks in this seam, just trying to solidify everything. You see I've got it clamped in numerous places, underneath, on top, so forth, just to hold it together, hold it stable. Let's see how it goes. It's gonna be a lot of welding. Okay, now anyone who has ever watched this channel knows that I like to show my mistakes, and I've got 2. Number 1 is pretty obvious. This bearing is nicely cracked. I'm gonna share the blame on that one. The issue is the company that makes this bolt sent me a bent bolt. It's bent right at the end here, and instead of examining it or, you know, trying to be careful about it, I just tried to hammer it home, and as you can see, it put enough stress on the whole thing that it broke this casting. Not really a big deal. I've already received the replacements. I'm just gonna install them now. It's just gonna be such a pain to get that shaft aligned again, but what are you gonna do? The other issue is, you remember these 3 holes I cross-drilled so you can set the position of this arm? Well, I did drill them. They're over here. I don't even know what to say. I actually tacked this together like days and days ago, fully welded it a few days ago, and I've only just noticed now that I flipped one of the plates. So obviously I'm not taking this apart. I'm gonna try to drill 2 more holes here. And yeah, that's gonna be fun drilling through 1/2-inch plate with a hand drill, but not sure what else I could be doing. Longer to try to transport this thing into the machine shop area, set it all up and everything, versus just straight up drilling the holes. So let's get to it. Alright, so for the propulsion system on the truck side, this is what we're going to start with. This is actually an adapter to mount a pintle hitch onto a normal kind of ball hitch. I'm going to weld to this face of this nice thick plate and everything. I've got this really heavy thick wall material to use as the arms. That one's just going to be a cross brace, and then we're going to weld these D-rings on. These are 4-ton, should be plenty. Just need to cut out some more plate steel so I can join all these pieces together and reinforce them with some bracketry, so to speak. Okay, so the trailer hitch side of our propulsion system is basically ready to go. It's all cut out and we just got to weld it together. This end is going to be 2 plates sandwiching like this, and then that's all going to get welded to this hitch, something like that. And then finally on the outside we're going to weld some more plates like that. They're basically just going to be mounting brackets for these welded on D-rings, more or less. Lots of welding to go, so more time-lapse action. Okay, it is day, I don't know. I'm trying to finish up the last few projects here. And what this one is a blade guard. I'm going to take this angle aluminum, just this thin stuff, but it's nice and round on the outside. I'm going to bend it to the exact angle that the Dragon Slayer bevels are. And then if I've got some time, I will epoxy some magnets onto the surface so it'll stick to the blade. Now I know what you're thinking. Yeah, if you get hit by the Dragon Slayer, it doesn't matter if it has a blade guard on it or not. The answer is probably not that much. I think the primary purpose is going to be just to protect from cuts. So when the blade is 300 plus pounds, you know, why not be as safe as possible? I think I'm going to take this chunk of wood. I'm going to take this digital angle finder and I'm going to make the exact angle of the bevel. And then I'll just mark it and then cut it on a bandsaw. I'm almost out of time and I'm completely out of sanity, so, you know, you get what you get, but you gotta make something. That 39.2, I think I was shooting at 38 degrees. That's gonna be close enough. Okay, so tomorrow is the weekend, the last weekend before I have to deliver this, so it's gonna be testing time. I have to get this thing done tonight. So, got a few things left here. This is gonna be the winch mount. It's just gonna be a simple winch to raise the sword into position after it's been fired. I gotta fit these two things together, like so. You can see it's actually very, very, very close. But there's a weld in there I gotta get rid of. You can see it. I'm gonna use that thing to get rid of that. And then I'll just kind of run this against the belt sander to just get a little bit of material off. Just a tiny bit so it'll fit inside that sleeve. That wasn't too bad. I basically just kind of shined it up a little bit. You can see I didn't even get into all the mill scale, but nice. Just a little bit of wobble. That's fine. All right, let's drag this over to the milling machine. I'm gonna put a cross hole through this so I can bolt this together and, you know, separate it as needed. Nice. Perfect. What you're looking at here is actually some gym equipment. I figured there could be situations where we needed to manually move the blade around, and I wanted to make it somewhat safe. These lat pull-down bars have handles and knurling on them already, so it was a quick and easy solution. And then, over here, we're working on the landing platform for the sword. To cushion the fall of the sword without damaging it, this is 3/4 inch plywood with 110 pounds of rubber mats meant for horse stalls. Underneath that, we've got 3 4x4s. I figure these should take 4,000 to 5,000 pounds of force to break each, so it should be okay. I've got two 10,000-pound ratchet straps holding this up. I think the weak point is going to be this thing. We'll see how it goes. Scariest moment of my life. Oh boy. Okay, so that manual hand winch did not go anywhere, but now that I'm going with a real winch with like 10 times the capacity, I'm gonna make a sort of mobile mount for it. This is basically a 2-inch hitch receiver. It's just a weldable version. I cut out some heavy scrap, 1/2-inch plate that's gonna get welded over the end. And then we're gonna weld on our last little D-ring here, and that can be used to kind of like attach to webbing that's gonna attach somewhere on the forklift, something heavy, and then I'll have like a mobile winch. I can mount it anywhere. That was quick and dirty. Let's go play with the winch now. Alright, the UPS guy was very kind today. We've got our winch kit, we've got our hitch mount for the winch, and then we've got our mobile hitch, I guess, that I fabricated last night. Let's do some assembly and let's see if we can make this thing work. Okay, half hour of assembly. We've got our hitch winch mount attached to our fabricated hitch. We've got the winch itself all wired up to our little battery here. This should be sufficient, hopefully. All right, let's go try this out. All right, quick little update on this pivot assembly. I ended up drilling out all these holes to 13/16, about 21 millimeters. I previously had these 1/2-inch grade 8 bolts in there. You can see how much smaller they are, but they did not work. They sheared off when I had a little bit too much force on this thing. Now, given that this is really a safety device, I really want this to be much stronger. So I've got these guys. These are 3/4-inch pins. They've got a breaking strength of 47,000 pounds, and hopefully they're sufficient for this. Now, as far as the winch goes, we're hooked up here. We got this massive web sling connected here. This whole thing will just kind of rise up kind of like that once we put some tension on it, but hopefully it's sufficient. This is a 13,000-pound winch, so I'm feeling much more optimistic about this. Plus, I got my handy remote so I can stand this far away. Final upgrade here is to the platform. We've gone from 3 4x4s to 4 6x6s. Hopefully this is enough. If it's not, I don't even know what we could use. This is what's left of the 4x4s, by the way. We had 2 of them break totally. This one did survive, kind of. There's all kinds of cracks, actually, at least halfway through. So we were pretty close to busting this whole thing. I would say that was a good 10,000 pounds of force. Alright, so, with the testing concluded successfully, I grabbed my best friend in the whole wide world and we loaded up for a little collaboration with the Unsubscribed podcast down in Texas. It was quite an adventure hauling 2,000 pounds of equipment for the 3,000 pound round trip, but it was definitely worth it. I got to film on site at Demolition Ranch and got some superb footage of the contraption in action. We were able to utilize both the 123-pound Buster Sword and the 324-pound Dragon Slayer against some ballistic gelatin dummies. Both of these videos are currently live on Pepperbox TV. Yes, it is a paid subscription service, however, there is a free 14-day trial. Trust me, it's worth it for the slow-mo footage alone.
Action!